So, hi everyone, it's awesome that you're here. Welcome to TelemetryDeck's first ever webinar. I'm super excited to tell you about how you can use TelemetryDeck to find out whether the features of your app are properly utilized. To find out like which features of your app are used the most, and also like to find out how people configure your app if the app allows for any configuration. All right, quick introduction. I'm Daniel. I'm TelemetryDeck's co-founder. I'm also the lead developer and CTO. And I'm joined today by my awesome coworker, Marina, who is in charge of TelemetryDeck's documentation.
Hi, my name is Marina, as Daniel said. I'm here today to forward all the questions you have to Daniel. So feel free to ask them in the chat and I will just pick them up after Daniel presented.
Awesome, yeah. All right, I'm gonna do a quick poll here because I want to know what's the technical background of people that are in this seminar right now. Like, are we going to go, and the result of the poll will decide, like, are we going to go deeper into the technical implementation of TelemetryDeck, or are we going to go more surface level on the technical stuff and deeper into the like analytics and how to use stuff? And I see, okay, we're pretty much split 50-50 between technical and non-technical people. So that's good to know. So we will go a bit into the technical side, but will also go a bit into the less technical side, and then see how we feel about that. And of course, as Marina just said, like, just if you have any questions, just raise your hand, just write them in the chat, whatever, and we will gladly answer them. All right, what are the topics today? Today, first of all, I'm going to give you an overview about like how TelemetryDeck looks and how it works. And then we're going to have an example app, and we're going to install TelemetryDeck into that example app to show you like how that is done and how easy it is. And then we're going to use the example app to construct various scenarios on how to in which ways we want to analyze this app, and we want to improve retention. We want to improve how the features are used, and we want to measure how the features are used, stuff like that. So we're going to look at various ways of measuring feature usage. We're going to look at just like generally what information do you immediately get after installing the TelemetryDeck package, but we're also going to look at view analytics. We're going to look at event analytics and configuration analytics, and we're going to explain that later during the webinar. At the end, we're going to have another Q&A, so we can have a more open discussion in that part of the webinar. If you want, you can also turn on your microphone and we can have a little deeper discussion. But you can also ask longer questions, and we can show like the answers to these questions directly. We're going to be using a sample project, and at the end of the webinar, I'm also going to share links to that example project. So if you want to follow along with the code, you can do that by just downloading the example project at the end of the webinar. All right, I'm gonna share my screen, and hang on, this is what I want to show you first. Here we go. All right, so this is TelemetryDeck, and it's showing the overview page for one of our internal apps. So it doesn't have too many users, but it's a good starting point for just what we want to do. So immediately, as you see, TelemetryDeck gives you, after you install it, this gives you like the most important data without you having to configure anything. So in this overview page, I always see the number of users that I have. I see my system versions, and I see my app versions. So number of users is pretty self-explanatory, and it's always nice to see that go up because it motivates us, and it also tells us like how are our changes impacting the overall usage of the app. Then system versions is also very interesting. For example, here we see that the overwhelming majority of the users who use this app are running it on the newest operating system. And this allows us to be very aggressive with updates and with requiring new features and new operating systems for our new features. For example, in this app, this app shows charts. So because so many people are using the newest version of iOS here, we can very soon decide if we want to use the new charting feature of the new operating system, for example. And we don't have to wait for the people on older operating systems to catch up. And then the app versions, this is also super helpful and interesting to us. This is basically for each day, like how many people are using which version of this app. And you see the dark green version is the newest version. So most people will actually use the newest version. And there are some stragglers on the second newest version, but people are generally updating. If I actually go in there, I will see that there's like a very tiny amount of people who are using a very old app. That is one app that had its updater broken. And so we did send out a newsletter at some point, but there's a few straggler on that version of the app. But this is also very important information. So how does this data get into TelemetryDeck? You get data into TelemetryDeck by sending us so-called signals. So a signal is basically a piece of information that contains a timestamp and some additional information. So these are the most recent signals that this app has sent to TelemetryDeck, and I'm going to look at this new session began signal. So as you can see, a signal always has a type. The type in this case is new session began. So this tells us what happened. In this case, the app has entered the foreground and therefore automatically started a new interaction session. We also know when we have received this signal. At this point, we are cutting off the minutes and the seconds of each timestamp. This is for privacy reasons. So this says 10 a.m. sharp, even though it's probably been received at 10:15 or whatever, 10:45. And the count is for if we receive the same signal multiple times. And then we also have a user identifier and a session identifier. The session identifier is pretty straightforward. It's just an ID that's auto-generated for this session, and it groups all the signals of this session together. The user identifier is generated and anonymized in multiple ways. So while using your app, you will probably have either an auto-generated user identifier that is generated from the identifier of your user's device, or you can give us a user identifier that you know, such as your user's email address. And then immediately on the device, we will start anonymizing this user identifier. We will salt it and we will hash it. And then only then we will send it to our server. And then on the server, a second pass of salting and hashing will happen. And this completely severs the connection between the original piece of data that you put in there and the end result user identifier. So this is very important because this is what allows us to be completely GDPR compliant and respectful of your user's privacy, but still be able to recognize a returning user. Because if the user with the same email address will then later return to your app, they will still, the same user identifier will be created for them. All right. And lastly, every signal can have a payload. A payload is just a number of key value pairs that we can append to this signal. This can be everything, but by default, the TelemetryDeck package will automatically send these information with each signal. For example, there's the app version in there. We have the system version for the operating system. We have the model name. So this person has an iPhone 14, lucky them. I'm still an iPhone 12. And we have locale, for example. So this person is from Australia, obviously. And you can add even more information to this payload list, of course. So this is something that by default, we will also already send some information that we're pretty sure that most apps will use and will have, but you can also add more information here. All right, how do I actually get at this information if I don't want to go to the overview page? What I do is I create so-called insights. So insights are these cards, we call them insights. And an insight is just one view into your data. So for example, you've just seen that the user we've looked at came from Australia. So let's look at, with the locales breakdown, let's look at how, where most of our users are located. Like, unsurprisingly, most of the users for this application have a locale of ENUS, so they're probably from the US. Then we have lots of Australians for some reason, which is not entirely clear to me, but it's good to know. We have New Zealanders, we have Austrians, we have Finns, we have Italians, and so on. And also pretty interesting, most of these people, even if they come from different countries, and even if they come from different countries that are not English speaking, they still use the English, they still have their operating system set to English. Like, for example, this person, or the person, like lots of persons are using the English language setting with Italian locale settings here. So pretty interesting. And that is because this app skews very strongly towards developers right now. And developers are notorious for using the English languages in their devices, like I do, and I'm from Germany. All right. So how does this, how does this work? Like I will go and create this insight, and then I can live edit it. So I can, for example, I can change the name of the insight. I can change how it is displayed, like as a table, for example, or bar charts or donut charts, which make the most sense in this case. I can make it bigger just if I want to show it like in a bigger way. And also I can change like the query that actually produces the data. For example, right now I'm looking at all the signals that the app is sending, because this makes sense because all the signals contain automatically the locale part. But maybe I just want to look at the new session began signal. And you can see that slightly changes the distribution of the chart. And why does it do that? Because this chart actually doesn't count users right now, it counts signals. So let's activate the unique by user checkmark. And so this is a more accurate representation of how like our users are mostly distributed. Still starts with US, but then the second largest user group is from Germany instead. So it turns out that probably it wasn't a large number of Australians that were using our app. It was more like a single user that was using the app a lot and who is from Australia. And we can change, like this doesn't make sense for this, but we can change the granularity. So if we have some data that is grouped, we can group it by day, by week, by month, and so on. Let's look at another example, which is the display modes. So this is actual custom data. So some of these signals what we do is we send along, like this is called widget reloaded, for example. I want to go to an insight shown signal. I think yes. So this is being sent when an insight is shown in this app, and this will append. I'm hoping this will append somewhere in this list. I can't find it right now, but somewhere in this list is basically a variable that's called display mode. So we can break down these display modes just the same way as we did the locales before. But the difference is that this is data that we as developers have embedded into TelemetryDeck or have told TelemetryDeck to send along with the signal. So this is pretty cool because it shows you that you can add your own data into TelemetryDeck and analyze it exactly the same way as like pre-existing data or like pre-selected data will be analyzed. And for example, here we see that of the various display modes, most of them are basically used in the same way. We can also look at various breakdowns for users, for example. I'm just gonna show you this here because this is pretty interesting. What we can see here is that we can display time-based data in various line or bar charts. And they can also change the granularity of this display. For example, I could change the granularity way down to day or even hour, and then get a different way of displaying this data. And of course, I can also put it up even through the year. But yeah, it will fall through an error because like the date range that I'm looking at is actually less than a year. So let's try month maybe. Yeah, that works. Yeah, but in this case, we want to show a weekly breakdown. All right. One more thing, you have this cool editor that gives you a lot of power right there, and as you see, it's real time. You can't really do anything wrong here. You can just try out and play around with your data. But if you are if you want even more, if you want to combine data in weird ways, or if you want to run like not only aggregations, like how many of each is how many entries of each type are in these signals, but you will also want to run post aggregations, like compare different insights to each other, or do very, very complicated stuff. We also have our own query language. So you see that down here. What I can do here is I can convert this insight to a custom query insight, and then I get the same data, but now I can very, very directly change the way this data is retrieved. And I can add more filters or more complicated filters. I can do more with the data. So most users won't use this very often, but it's good to have it because it's really helpful if you have very complicated needs that we can fulfill those needs, even if it's a bit more work than with the normal editor. All right. So this is a quick overview about what TelemetryDeck is and what it can do. And now we're going to jump into implementing TelemetryDeck with our app. Are there any questions in the meantime? I'm going to switch over to Zoom to see if you have questions, but okay, I don't have any notifications of your questions. All right, so let's look at our example app. I love pizza. So I made an app to help me make pizza. And to make pizza, you first of all have to make the dough. And many people don't know this, but proper and good pizza dough, you make it the day before, and then it rests for 8 to 10 hours in the fridge. And then the next day it will have, like, the yeast will have risen and will be awesome pizza dough, and will be really really easy to work with, and you can like throw it around and make like these perfectly round pizzas and everything. And then of course you put all your toppings on the pizza, and then you bake it. And for baking, I have access to a really good pizza oven that is very hot. That's like 500 degrees centigrade. And so it's very important not to overcook the pizza. It can be in there for like 30 to 45 seconds. So I thought, let's make an app that helps me with these two things. Let's make an app that will help me with the dough. So it will give me a dough timer. So when I put the dough into the fridge, I just press this play button, and it will give me a countdown of 8 hours. So I know if the dough has had enough time to rest. And then what I also have is a baking timer. This is not a countdown, but it counts up instead. So if I put the pizza into the oven, I can then push this play button, and it will count up and tell me like, how long has this pizza been in the oven? So very important app, of course. And a third thing that this app does is it has settings. And the settings are basically, I can just change the units. I can change the units from metric to imperial. And just for this funny joke, I also added radians, which doesn't really make sense. But anyway, I'm going to set it to metric because I measure my pizza in centimeters and centigrades and stuff like that. All right, so let's add TelemetryDeck to this very cool application. To do that, I'm going to go back to the TelemetryDeck dashboard, and I'm going to create a new app. So I'm going to select create new app. I'm going to give it the same name as my app, which is Pizza Maker Pro. And then it will immediately give me information on how to set up this app. So this app is a Swift app. So I'm going to use the Swift SDK. But of course, you can also write your app in JavaScript or with Kotlin for Android, with Unity. And we have even more community packages on our website. Okay, let me zoom in a bit. So I'm going to get this link here. Don't worry, this is all in our README, but this is what I need to add TelemetryDeck to my application. And I'm going to add a new package. So let's just paste this in here. Sorry about that. And we have added our telemetry client package to our project. You see it here in the left sidebar. All right, now we have to initialize it. To do that, we're going to go to the main entry point file into the app. This is our app subclass. So this is where we're going to initialize this. And to initialize something, I just have to write an init function here. So I'm going to add an init here. Hang on. And I didn't want to type so much, so I've prepared some code snippets here, but this is what you would type in here. So we need a configuration. So let's add a telemetry manager configuration that needs the app ID. What is the app ID? Let's go back to the browser. And here we go. This is the app ID. Let's copy that into the clipboard and go back, and we can paste it here. So this is our new app ID. And then we can also add more configuration here, but we actually have all the configuration that we need for now. So let's initialize this thing. It doesn't work because we have not imported it. Now this should build, in fact. It does. All right. Let's rebuild our app. Let's restart it. And the app has started. And what happens now is, let me go to the dashboard again. Immediately, you should be receiving signals. So let's go to the overview, and there's nothing. Why is there nothing? Because we haven't activated test mode. You see, if you are developing your app on your computer, you're not a real user. And so TelemetryDeck recognizes that and will mark all the signals that it sends as test mode signals. So, so that they don't actually poison your actual data set. So let's enable test mode. And we see we have one user. Awesome. And we also see that we have now one signal that has been sent as the new session has begun. And just as with the signals that you've seen before, it has a name, it has a timestamp, it has an automatically generated user identifier, and it has the default payload. We can add stuff to there, of course, but even if we don't do anything, we already get a lot of cool information. What I can also now do is I can create an insight. I'm going to creating a group for our insights, and then I'm going to create an insights that will show me, let's say, give you the daily active users. We've already seen that on the front page, but that's kind of cool. I also want the app versions, and I'm also not going to do any changes to that. Of course, you just have one app version right now. I want the system versions. Right, and I want the device types. I'm gonna get a sip of water here. And these, of course, I can edit those, but I can also just leave them as is. And what I want to show you here is that we can give you various default insights, but you can also edit those. So for example, if I create another daily active users insight, but then I want to change the name, I'm going to change the name to weekly users who are Australian. I'm going to display this as a bar chart. I want all signals, but grouped by week. And then I also want to have something that's like locale equals ENAU. Same. Does it work? It works. Okay. We have 0 Australian users right now, which is not surprising, but maybe that will come in handy at some point later in the week. Okay, so this is all information that we immediately receive just by including these 2 lines of TelemetryDeck and initializing them. But let's get more, because we want to, this webinar is about how to see which features are being used. So there are various ways of finding out how your features are being used, and the most one of the ways that is happening is by just tracking views. So as you've seen, this app has 4 views. It has this overview view that we are seeing right now. It has the view for the dough timer, it has the view for the baking timer, and it has the view for the settings. So we want to know how many times are these screens being viewed. So, and that's pretty easy to get. So to get at that information, we just have to send a signal whenever one of those screens is being opened. So let's go to the content view. Let's not forget to import the client this time. And so this is the code that creates the view that you see on the right side of your screen right now. And what I'm going to do is at the end of this, I'm going to add an onAppear modifier and send a TelemetryDeck signal. Let me just fill this in. Apologies. All right. So what are we doing here? We are using the onAppear modifier to do something when this view appears. And what we are doing is we're going to send a TelemetryDeck signal of type view. And we're also adding an additional piece of metadata into the payload, which is the view name. So if we do this with all of our views, then the end result will be that each of these views will send a signal of type view, and then, but it will have a different view name. And that's pretty powerful, as we can see. Okay, let's go to the settings. I'm just going to show the screen on the left side as well. Import the client, and then append our onAppear snippet. Hang on, that's the wrong one. This looks better. Okay, so this is settings, then the dough timer, onAppear snippet. Here we go. Also, don't forget the import. Of course, this is using Swift UI, but we support normal Swift. We support using UIKit and AppKit, and we even support Objective-C. So if you have an older iOS app or one that still has parts that are written in Objective-C, that also works. Okay, let me just double check what I did. So dough time, this is the baking timer. This is the dough timer. These are the settings. All right, let's restart the app. And of course, from the user perspective, nothing has changed, but let's just use the app a bit. So let's go into the dough timer multiple times. But, oh wait, I don't need the dough timer right now. I need the baking timer. So I'm gonna go to the baking timer. Oh yeah, that works, cool. And then I'm gonna check out the settings just to make sure everything works. And so I think we've now created enough data to analyze that. So let's go back to TelemetryDeck. And let's double check if the views have actually arrived. They have. So for example, here we see our new view signal, signal type view, but we will see that we have a view name of DoTimer. And this signal has been received in an identical fashion 3 times. So because I've clicked on the DoTimer, I've reopened the DoTimer 3 times. So now let's see how we can analyze these. I'm going to create a new group for this, and I'm going to call it features. So in my features group, I'm going to create a new insight. And none of the templates really work for now, so I'm just going to create an empty insight. And I'm going to give it the name view names. And I think a donut chart makes the most sense for this. We don't want all signals. We just want the signals of type view. And I think we want unique by user, but this doesn't really make sense if we only have me as one user. So I'm going to leave this checked off. And we want a top-end query that gives us the view names. All right, let's go back to the overview and see if it works. It does work. Cool. Okay, so we have view names. We have the DoTimer that's been opened 3 times. We have the baking timer with the content view, and we have, hang on, sometimes this hovering thing doesn't work. And we have the settings. Awesome. So we see that the DoTimer has been opened 3 times. All the other views have been opened once, which is very cool. What we can also do is we already have had like the daily active users. Let's just make another one that is called daily active views. So I'm going to start with the daily active users template, but I'm going to change stuff and only look at view signals, for example. And I could also like display different lines for the different views. I'm not going to do that for now. That's a bit too complicated for this webinar, but we can totally. Let me make this unexpanded. This is too big for my taste. All right, here we go. So this is just the number of views now, and just one. Because I think we are counting users, but we want to count signals instead. So this, as you see, this has automatically updated here. So we now have 6 views in total. Okay, cool. So this is a very important way of analyzing your app, because it will give you the different ways that people see your app. So this is why views are important when analyzing your app. There's another reason, because it will give you an indication of where people are stuck. For example, if you have 3 views in a row, and then people are always just visiting view 2 but never view 3, then you can realize that something is like, some people are stuck in view 2, for example. There's a third reason, and that is because in the future we're gonna launch various chart types that will allow you to look at the ways that people are looking at your views. And with those advanced chart types that we're going to launch next year, you can do even more with this information. Like I have a preview here on my computer. So look at the lower right here where it says view flow. This is the kind of data that we can also extract from your signals when you actually give us the view data in this form. And so it makes sense to do that. All right, so this is cool, but as I've said while using the app, I actually went into the DoTimer by mistake. Like, of course, I didn't really go into there by mistake, but I pretended to need the baking timer, but then I opened the DoTimer instead. So this is basically user error, and you can't see that. So how do we find out more about our user intention? And it would be better if we would not only track views, but only intentions. So for example, my intention is to start the baking timer. So I'm not only navigating to the baking timer, but I'm also starting it. And then I'm finishing my pizza, I'm resetting it, and I'm starting another pizza. So I'm actually using the baking timer way more often than the dough timer. So we want to represent this also in our data set. And for that, let's not only track views, but also let's track events. All right. So to do that, I want to send a signal whenever someone taps the play button on this and starts a new timer on both the baking timer and the dough timer. So let's go to the baking timer. And let's see, at the very top here, we have the toggle timer function. So this is what's being called whenever I press this timer button here. And let's add another snippet in there, which is, hang on, here we go. We're going to send a baking timer toggled signal in the baking timer view. And then in the dough timer, we have a very similar function, toggle timer. Here we go. And in here, we're going to send a dough timer toggled signal. Also, that also tells us the state of the timer. So if we disable the timer or re-enable the timer. Yeah. And as you can see, this is a different way of sending signals. So before, and let me scroll down so you can see, before that, we send a signal where the signal name view was a very generic naming scheme. So we just had view, and then we had all the different types of view. We all had that under in the payload. So it's just a payload parameter that we send along. But the main event type or the main signal type is always view. Whereas here, what we do is we send different signal types along with each action, with each event, and then the payload is only like metadata. There's not that important because it helps us distinguish whether someone clicked on the timer to enable it or to disable it, which is of course important, but not as important as like which view is actually being viewed. And the reason for that is that we can now see the reason for that is I think that okay, let me start again. Why are we doing this? We are doing this because the toggle timer signals are actually more important to us. So usually your heuristic for this would be, oh, if I want to track like viewing 100 different views, then I would totally do that using the like just one generic signal and then adding more and then editing the details and the metadata. And then I can easily create a breakdown of what are the different views that I want to look at. Whereas here, I'm more interested in like the 3 important events that I'm having. So I'm giving them more importance by this. But in theory, I could also do it like this. I could send a signal type of event, and then with the event type dough timer toggled. I'm not going to do this, but this is just an example. Right. This is also possible, but with our usage pattern, what I want to do right now, this works better. All right. We have an event that is being sent. We have a view that's being sent, a signal that's being sent. Well, we in the dough timer, one in the baking timer. So now let's generate some more data. I'm going to use the app. I'm going to go into the dough timer, realize, oh, no, I don't want to go into the dough timer. I want to go to the baking timer. Oh, but I went into the dough timer again. But finally, I reached the baking timer and I bake a lot of pizzas. So I'm gonna just like toggle this a few times to simulate this. All right, cool. So now we've created more data. Let's go back to TelemetryDeck. Let's look at our signals, and we see that the baking timer has been toggled a bunch of times. Actually, hang on. Let me also toggle the dough timer at least once. So we have this kind of data as well. All right, cool. And what we can do now is we can create more insights here, but we're already almost at the end of the time that we have. Actually, we're a bit above. I'm sorry about that. So I'm gonna be a bit more quick and tell you that you can also look at this kind of data in the signal types list. And here you can see that we see the number of times that the baking timer has been toggled and the dough timer has been toggled. And this is super important to us because even though the view for dough timer has been opened more often, the baking timer actually has way more signals. So that is really cool. And it tells us that people use the baking timer feature more. Super important. All right, one quick last configuration detail is, or one way of analyzing this your app this way is, I want to know what configuration are people using. Like, as you remember, in the settings, people can change their units from metric to imperial. So I want to see how many people are using metric and how many people are using imperial. So to do that, I'm just going to send that as metadata with our very first signal. So I'm going to send another signal whenever the app is started. And as metadata, I'm going to append there the configuration. So let's see. So whenever we reinitializing our app, I'm going to send a app launch regularly signal with a display unit parameter, but we don't have the display unit. Hang on. So let's get that from the app storage. Here we go. Because I'm going to say, so this retrieves us the display unit with a default value of metric if nothing is selected. And then we're going to send that to TelemetryDeck. So let's start the app. It should have automatically sent the signal already. Oh no, hang on. So I now want to go to the settings, also switch it to Imperial, and then restart the app so that it also sends one Imperial signal. All right, let's go back to TelemetryDeck. And we want another insight, and we want to see the units that people are using. This is another donut chart. We only want to see the app launch signal, and we want a breakdown of display unit. Here we go. Let's go to the overview, and we see only metric usages. Why do we only see metric usage? Let me just restart this app here, so it definitely sends. Because we are in metric. Okay, so we are actually we're actually storing correct data. We just said it wrong. But this insight would give you an overview over how your app is configured. So this is really important. This could be, are people sending notifications? Did people enable HealthKit, for example? Or in our case, like, what units are people using? And this will inform your development processes, and like it will inform you how people are using the app. And that's really important, because if everyone changes, or a significant number of people change their settings away from the default settings, maybe you should think about that. Because maybe for your users, the app is looking way different than for you during development. All right. We now have time for your questions. I'm going to stop my screen share for a second so I can actually see what you're writing. And I would love it if you wrote some questions that you have. Otherwise, we are done for today, I think. Oh, it seems I can also raise my hand. That's good to know. It's a bit useless, but it's good to know. All right. I don't think we have any questions. if you have any questions at a later point, like please send us emails. My email address is daniel@telemetrydeck.com. You can also go to our website and contact us over our Slack or our GitHub questions. It's been awesome seeing you. And I hope you have lots of fun using TelemetryDeck. And yeah, see you soon. Yeah, I'm going to end this now. So yeah, bye.
Bye.